The movie opens up as an old woman writes a letter for her granddaughter. It is evident that the letter is meant to be given much later, when her granddaughter comes of age. She writes that someday darkness and problems shall surround the kingdom of Dinotopia. Even in such moments, she reassures her granddaughter that help will come. The old woman then opens a small wooden box placed on her table. Inside it is an extremely shiny, powerful artifact known as the Sunstone. The scene then shifts as a businessman named Frank Scott arrives at an airport. He is accompanied by his two sons, David and Carl Scott, who are actually half-brothers. The trio then get into a small non-commercial plane and take off on an unplanned trip. Frank is flying the plane with Carl in the front seat with him. All the while, David nervously watches from the back seat. It is obvious that among the three, David is the most reserved type who just so happens to be afraid of heights. Sometime later, Frank offers the plane's control to Carl. The young man is hesitant, but when his dad urges him to fly the plane, he takes the opportunity enthusiastically. Frank, on the other hand, leans back and tells his son to wake him up 20 minutes later. Initially, everything seems to be going just fine as Carl is handling the plane extremely well. Things, however, begin to take a turn for the worse, and that too very quickly. A storm emerges out of nowhere, and Carl wakes his dad up. Frank immediately takes control of the plane, but the wind is too strong. The plane rapidly loses height and eventually crashes into the sea below. As the plane begins to sink deeper, Carl manages to free his brother, who immediately swims up. Carl then heads back to grab their father, but the old man is caught in the seatbelt. Frank realizes there is no way for him to escape, and thus pushes Carl away. Just when the young man swims up for air, we see a giant fish swimming towards the sinking plane. Following this, the two brothers manage to ride out the stormy waves by sticking together. They keep swimming until eventually the storm subsides and they finally make it to land. It appears to be a huge deserted island with no signs of any town or village. While gathering their strength, the two brothers also talk about the deadly disaster they just faced. David says that they should have stayed back and saved their father. Carl, on the other hand, reveals that there was nothing he could do in that situation. Nonetheless, the two brothers then head towards the interior of the island. They walk for several hours, and David notes something really weird. All the islands around this place look exactly the same, while there seems to be absolutely no signs of life. They are discussing this matter when they come across a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. The two brothers are left speechless, as it appears to be the real deal. Suddenly, a section of the giant rock explodes into smithereens. The two brothers duck and take cover from the falling debris. Meanwhile, a figure appears from what was the mouth of the giant dinosaur mouth. He loudly yells out that he is just an archaeologist who is searching for possible sunstones and also has the permission from the Vulcan Council. This makes no sense to the two brothers, who stand speechless. After the strange man sees the duo, he immediately realizes that they are not from these parts. He introduces himself as Cyrus Crab and says he has an interest in archaeology. Noticing that the youngsters are lost, Cyrus reveals that they are in Dinotopia and offers to accompany them to the bus stop. On this mysterious island, there is no telephone and no other means of communicating with the rest of the world. While walking through a village, they notice that some villagers are fleeing in despair when they discover that they are being chased by an ankylosaurus. The creature seems to be dazed and in pain due to some unknown reason. This is when a beautiful young girl named Marion Waldo approaches the beast to find out what's going on. After calming the dinosaur down, she manages to rid it of a terrible toothache. Meanwhile, before saying goodbye to the young men, Cyrus hands them his store card and recommends that they go to the capital, Water City, where they will receive help with everything they need. Coincidentally, Marion is also on her way to the city and accompanies the pair to the bus, which is actually a brachiosaurus. On the way, they need to make a stop because it's getting dark, and there are Tyrannosaurus footprints everywhere. So, the best decision to make is to find a safe place to spend the night and continue their journey the next morning. After finding shelter and eating, the group goes to sleep. But David hears a strange noise and gets up in the middle of the night. He immediately wakes up his brother, and after looking out of the window, Carl tells him that they are safe. Suddenly, a T-Rex destroys the shelter, and everyone immediately has to flee to escape alive. During her escape, Marion stumbles and falls to the ground. She is about to be devoured when the Skyback's pilots show up and, with the help of their pterosaurs, manage to scare off the predators. When the area is safe, Unu, the squad leader, guides the survivors back to the Brachiosaurus. The next morning, they manage to reach their destination. At this point, Carl and David discover that Marion is the daughter of the mayor of the City of Waters and are invited to register as Dinotopian citizens. After signing up, Carl discovers that he won't receive any help to leave the island, and he becomes desperate. The mayor reveals that for centuries, countless people have tried to leave Dinotopia, but all have perished on the way. Now that the town has new residents, Marion is tasked with introducing them to the customs of her people and decides to start by taking the brothers to the library. Once there, they meet Zippo and are surprised to discover that some dinosaurs have learned to speak the human language. That evening, the young woman celebrates her 18th birthday and receives a special gift from her father. The Lightstones are extremely rare minerals and are responsible for generating all the energy on the island. So, her father presents her with a necklace that belonged to the girl's late grandmother. The next day, she takes David to see Dinotopia's main energy source, which is located at the top of a tower. To get there, the couple has to climb a staircase with 361 steps, and the young man is impressed by the view from the top. At that moment, he comes across the most powerful lightstone ever found and is enchanted by its beauty. Every night, the main lightstone regenerates the other gems that are in the possession of the villages scattered across the island. While David learns more about Dinotopia, Carl pays a visit to Cyrus's store and asks for his help to get out of the place. The young man can't wait to return home, but everyone says it's impossible to leave. When he hears this, Cyrus says that if anyone leaves the island, Dinotopia will be at risk, as the whole world will know of its existence. Because of this, the mayor will do anything to ensure that Carl can never leave. However, Cyrus is working on a map that can guide Carl back home. According to him, all he needs to complete it is a diary that is kept with the archives of the old library. The problem is that Zippo is the only one who has the key to this place. So, if he wants to escape, Carl will have to do the dirty work of stealing it. After accomplishing this mission, he manages to get the diary and gives the notes to Cyrus. Meanwhile, David continues to work hard to become a true Dinotopian and even learns to speak the language of dinosaurs. That afternoon, the two brothers get into an argument after David says he doesn't miss his old life or even his late father. The fight quickly develops into a duel, and accidentally, they both end up falling into a waterfall. After the fall, David collapses, and the pair are carried away by the current until Carl finally manages to drag his brother to shore. When they realize that the young men are missing, Zippo and Marion set out to look for them and enlist the help of a messenger bird to track them down. Hours later, while Carl is drinking water in a river full of crocodiles, the bird manages to find him and returns to Marion to inform her of the young men's whereabouts. Shortly afterward, the young woman arrives at their location, and Zippo is amazed to realize that he has just found a temple that has been lost for centuries. The dinosaur believes that those drawings on the wall could lead to one of the entrances to the underground world. According to legend, this is where all the lightstones are produced. As they are about to leave the temple, the group realizes that there are predators surrounding the river, and Marion tries to cross the bridge without being devoured. Fortunately, the young woman manages to reach the other side unharmed, but Zippo is not so lucky. The scaly guy ends up being knocked into the water and has his tail swallowed by the reptiles. However, Carl manages to help him escape and, with the help of his friend, takes David back to the Water City. A few days later, the trio visits Rosemary, Marion's mother, and the mayor's estranged wife. Unlike her ex-husband, she lives in a small village and has a real passion for country life. Among her main duties is the responsibility of deciding the fate of the young people in her village and selecting each of them for the job that best suits their vocation. The woman then assigns Carl to work in the nursery so that he can help look after the baby dinosaurs. On the other hand, David is sent to train with the Skybacks with the aim of becoming a pilot. Finally, Marion is sent to Canyon City with David. However, unlike him, her mission will be to study the pterodactyls. On his first day at work, Carl meets Samantha, Marion's younger sister, who introduces him to the nursery. All the inhabitants of Dinotopia must have a dinosaur as a life partner, and Carl's is yet to be born. His egg is number 26, and he has to look after it until the baby hatches. Meanwhile, in Canyon City, David joins the rest of the class for his first lesson as a Skybacks pilot. Unu, the squadron leader, is responsible for instructing the new cadets and reveals that only 12 pilots are selected each year to be part of that group. At that moment, Marion is standing on a rock observing the pterodactyls and taking notes. While observing these creatures, she realizes that one of them has been rejected by her dang for being different from the others, as it is albino. The animal can't get along with other individuals of its species, so Marion tries to get close to it and begins to form a bond with the dinosaur. As part of his lesson, David needs to learn to balance in order to stay on top of the pterodactyl during the flight, so he trains on a machine but is unable to perform well. A few days after starting work at the nursery, Carl realizes that his egg has started to crack and he can finally meet his dinosaur. On seeing the baby, Samantha asks the young man to choose a name for him, and thanks to his lack of creativity, Carl decides to call him 26. One day, while watching the Skybacks, Marion ends up being attacked by them, and David rushes to help her. When she was about to be devoured, the young girl used her light stone to defend herself and managed to ward off the dinosaurs. Even after spending several weeks in Dinotopia, Carl can't get used to living there and walks along the beach while trying to find a way off the island. At that moment, he spots an abandoned boat and decides to make the necessary repairs so that he can use it as a means of transportation to escape. While working on his new project, the young man receives a visit from Cyrus, who advises him not to leave without a navigation map. The man says that he can get this map for Carl as long as the young man steals the Stone of Light from the nursery and gives it to him. After weeks of intensive training, David and his class finally take their first flight. Sure, I'll continue generating the text based on the provided story outline. The young man is excited to receive his saddle, but soon discovers that he will have to pass a final test before being approved to become a Skybacks pilot. The young man must spend the night in the nest of a pterodactyl, only after which he will receive his saddle. When she finds out what has happened, Marion goes to visit her friend and offers to accompany him on this mission. During the climb, the young woman encourages David not to give up on his goal and ends up slipping while trying to climb one of the rocks. Seeing Marion in danger, the young man reaches out to her and manages to pull the girl back up. Although terrified, they manage to reach the top and feel relieved when they find the nest. During the night, the couple are visited by an albino pterodactyl, and David manages to communicate with it. He then discovers that the animal is called Free Fall. Determined to leave Dinotopia, Carl makes the difficult decision to steal the light stone that supports the nursery and plans to use it as a bargaining chip to get the map that will take him home. What the young man doesn't realize is that Cyrus isn't interested in helping him leave and sabotages the boat that Carl has spent several days working to repair. After making the exchange, Carl begins his journey across the ocean, and Cyrus discovers that he has been tricked. Instead of handing over the Stone of Light, Carl takes the jewel with him to the boat and manages to throw it back into the nursery. Meanwhile, 26 is looking for him and spots his human trying to cross the ocean. He quickly jumps into the sea and tries to swim to reach him. At this point, the young man realizes that his boat is sinking and uses a bucket to remove the water. However, when he realizes that 26 is drowning, He jumps into the water and swims towards it. After saving him, Carl returns with the baby to the island and takes him safely back to the nursery. Now that he has passed the final test, David has been approved to take part in the graduation ceremony where the new cadets will have their first and only chance to qualify as a Skybax pilot. If no pterodactyl answers their call, they will be dismissed from the squadron. Minutes before David's final test, his brother Carl shows up and joins Marion in the stands. It is obvious that no matter how much the two brothers fight, they always have each other's back. The ceremony soon starts, and Romana goes as the first cadet to face the exam. It doesn't take her long to summon her stead, and she passes with flying colors. Gradually, the cadets come and try their luck one by one. Finally, it is David's turn, and he proudly climbs to the dais. He then extends his arm, a symbol for the pterodactyls to come to him. Unfortunately for him, none of the Skybacks answer his call. David knows this is the end and returns with his head bent down. Frustrated at the outcome, he returns the saddle to his instructor and goes back to his room to pack and leave. Nonetheless, he pays one last visit to the training room and decides to give it another go. So the young man takes his saddle and walks to the track. When they realize what is happening, everyone gathers around him as they are curious to know what will happen this time. Free Fall heeds David's call, and for the first time in his life, he gets to ride a Skybax.